I wanted to be the slutty schoolgirl, and I wanted to be bent over on stage.
Are you gonna leave me for Manson?
No.
It would be okay if you did. What's up, YouTube?
Hi.
We're the God Bombs.
I'm Nola Star.
Justin Symbol.
We just got done with a cute little boudoir photo shoot. That's why we're so fancy pants.
And we're also fancy because we're celebrating 2,000 subscribers. Thank you guys so much for subscribing to our channel. If you haven't, please hit the subscribe button now. Hit the bell icon for notifications. This is a very exciting moment. It is the continuation of my ongoing review of Marilyn Manson's whole discography. And we had to get all fancy and dressed up because not only do we have 2,000 subscribers now, but this is obviously the _1 most important album in Manson's discography. It is the breakthrough moment. It is, of course, Antichrist Superstar. This album really cemented Marilyn Manson as a household name all across America. It went platinum. It was #3 on the charts. It was a huge smash success. It had many singles from it. Beautiful People, Tourniquet, Man That You Fear. There's not a bad song on this thing. Some of the highlights for me, I love the song Kinderfeld. I think it's really cool, creative, and heavy in a really sleazy, sinister kind of way. The title track is phenomenal. It's just a really simple riff, but it's so powerful and you feel like you're at some kind of rally. 1996 obviously has phenomenal lyrics.
Dried Up, Tied Up, and Dead to the World. That is also one of my favorites other than Crypt Orchid.
The video for Man That You Fear is so cool. And you could see the beginning of Manson's interest in a kind of Western aesthetic that would become more dominant later in more recent albums, like High End of Low or We Are Chaos, his latest album.
I like Crypt Orchid.
Crypt Orchid is phenomenal because it gives you like this weird little breather between all the heaviness, and it's such a weird kind of trippy song. And actually the term Crypt Orchid is when one of the testicles will actually doesn't descend.
Oh, lovely.
So to me,
I love orchids, that's all I was thinking.
Manson's look at the time was really cool. It was inspired by Frankenfooter from Rocky Horror Picture Show.
I had a picture of him on my wall actually, in that thong and the waist cincher, and it was like right there, like when I'd be getting ready in my mirror, and I'd be like, I was just like, man, I really hope I find a guy that loves wearing makeup one day, because that's definitely my jam.
Well,
so.
Here I am.
Oh my goodness.
We don't want to smear our makeup.
Yeah, just kidding. I remember hiding this album and a 9 Inch Nails album. I like borrowed them from a friend, and I like snuck them home and would only play them when my mom was at work.
Yeah.
And my mom was a really cool mom too. Like, she got me into tons of rock and roll, but she didn't want me listening to those two, I guess, probably quite yet at the age that I wanted to listen to them.
Yeah.
So they were under my pillow and with my diary.
Right. Manson came out at the perfect time with this album where there was the whole satanic panic of the late 80s and 90s going on. Manson capitalized on America's need at the time for a boogeyman. Remember, this is before 9/11. Christianity was still going very strong in that period of time, and there was this conservative backlash against heavy metal music, and Manson was the latest in a series of rockers who embodied the rebellion of youth culture. And he talks about that a lot in his book, Long Hard Road Out of Hell. They used to put the albums on and play them backwards and say that there were satanic messages in the music.
Listen carefully. Raise your hands if you heard that.
And that only turned him on to rock and roll. Like, he went to a Christian school and they were like, don't listen to this, it's off limits, and it made him want to do it. It made him want to be the biggest, most shocking rock star.
Yeah, I think in general, anytime someone feels like strongly oppressed, it's obviously going to create some type of fire within someone.
Right. The protesting from conservative, right-wing, and Christian groups brought so much more attention to the Marilyn Manson phenomenon
They
at the time.
helped.
They were his biggest. They were his biggest marketing
fans,
campaign.
whether they realized it or not.
And I think Manson saw this rock and roll identity as a way to get out of a childhood where he felt bullied, he felt like a weakling, he felt like a dork, a loser, this kid that played Dungeons and Dragons and had bad skin problems. and had drooping earlobes that had to be clipped.
I'm learning a lot.
This album is about his transformation, metaphorically, from the worm, the nobody, into the Antichrist Superstar known around the world. And it was like a magical spell that worked. And there's so many references to magic and the occult and the artwork, and then the symbology of this album. There's references to the Kabbalah, Tetragrammaton, and other occult works where Manson channels these different symbols in the artwork. Another theme that's really important to this is the influence of Occult and Levay, the founder of modern day Satanism. Anton, around that time, took Manson under his wing as kind of a mentor and actually made Manson a reverend of the Church of Satan, which is one of the things that led to the huge scandal of Antichrist Superstar. I think Anton had a huge influence on Manson of sort of giving him a philosophy that he could kind of gravitate around and bring.
100%. I see that like totally woven through this album.
The idea of Satanism and sort of becoming the ultimate version of yourself that you can be, and kind of cutting away anyone or anything that doesn't fit your version of perfection is absolutely loud and proud in the idea of Antichrist Superstar.
Occultism is a sort of do-it-yourself God kit oriented towards personal power.
It's basically a one giant spell.
I like that.
In the process of transforming from the worm into the Antichrist Superstar, Manson has to shed his skin, and this is where we see the end of the Spooky Kids. It's the moment where Manson definitely took ownership and leadership of the band and kind of cut away what he thought were the weak parts of the band or anything that didn't fit his vision. Daisy Berkowitz, the co-founding guitarist of Marilyn Manson, this was his last hurrah in the band. But fortunately, his signature guitar playing is heard throughout this album, and he co-wrote some of the best songs on this album, like Tourniquet, Irresponsible Hate Anthem, Antichrist Superstar, Man That You Fear, 1996. So Daisy's still all over this thing, but you also have the emerging influence of Twiggy Ramirez, who started playing rhythm guitar on this album. Twiggy wrote the guitar on The Beautiful People. And I think Manson, even at that time, was channeling a black metal aesthetic, kind of subtly, but with the shift of his makeup became more of like a clown white with black lipstick.
It's like really embodying like the goth, the dark.
I feel like he was probably inspired by like the church burnings of artists like Mayhem and stuff.
Yeah, he was like burning a lot of Bibles and
the influence of so many talented people that were around. Trent Reznor, obviously the executive producer of the album.
Yeah.
He killed it. He also plays guitar and other instruments throughout the album. Other members of Nine Inch Nails are featured. Dave Ogilvy, who was the engineer for Skinny Puppy, a band that definitely influences Marilyn Manson. You can see that Skinny Puppy is the one that inspired him to use the stilts on stage and to have medical equipment and prosthetics.
And he had mentioned too, I feel like some interview at some point, that Jen from the Jenna Tortures also was one of his inspirations, which I always really liked because she definitely stuck out in my mind after I discovered her. So I think that's really cool to know that she'd also kind of inspired some of his stage show.
Yeah, and other artists that inspired this album include David Bowie. As always, David Bowie is an ongoing influence from Marilyn Manson. Yeah. Obviously, the music on Antichrist Superstar sounds absolutely nothing like Bowie. It's a very raw, very heavy industrial metal album. But the shock symbol itself, the infamous symbol that Manson uses for this album, actually was inspired by a symbol that would be on tour behind David Bowie during his Ziggy Stardust era performances. And it's also could be said to be inspired by the logo for the band Throbbing Gristle. Both of those artists were deliberately channeling sort of fascist Nazi imagery in their live performances, and Manson definitely channels Nazi imagery with Antichrist Superstar as a way of provoking and also as a way of showing that rock and roll itself has the pageantry and the larger-than-life symbology of a Nazi rally. It's very reminiscent of Pink Floyd's The Wall, which is another concept album about a fascist dictator's rise to power. It's larger than life. It channels Ziggy Stardust. It channels Ronald McDonald. He says, "I am so all-American, I'll sell you suicide," like a Happy Meal almost. He's like taking...
selling poison.
Right, he's taking these underground ideas and making it mainstream by making it larger than life.
And relatable. I just think whether people completely agreed with his ideologies, there was a part of them that understood and felt the same way.
And also because he talks about the fascism of Christianity, the fascism of beauty. The things that the Antichrist Superstar is rebelling against, ironically, he also utilizes fascist imagery in his rebellion. This would be also the end, unfortunately, of Manson and Trent Reznor's relationship of mentor and protege. Very similar to how Frank Zappa discovered Alice Cooper. Reznor kind of mentored Manson. Manson was like almost like his Frankenstein. And then the Frankenstein would go on to compete with him. And I think Antichrist Superstar was the end of that relationship for many reasons. A lot of it due to the fact that Manson at this point became Trent Reznor's equal. It was no longer like mentor and student. Now they were both huge level rock stars.
Well, also I would say that when you would reference industrial or goth culture, I don't know if anybody's ever gotten that mainstream.
Right. Before Manson's hit with Antichrist Superstar, Reznor was the face of industrial rock music in the mainstream. He was the only face that really penetrated through to the mainstream. And both of these artists were heavily inspired by artists like Ministry. And you can hear Ministry style riffs and drum patterns and guitar ideas throughout Antichrist Superstar. It's definitely the most Ministry inspired Manson album. It's the heaviest Manson album. It's interesting when you look at the making of this album that the band was almost in despair because they had been touring constantly at that time. They kind of had a hit with Sweet Dreams, but they really didn't have like enough of a leg to really stand on. And they really knew that they could make something better. And Manson felt like everyone was kind of abandoning him and like tuning out.
Baby drum mama.
They would go to the studio and they would just end up doing a bunch of drugs and all the recording sessions would kind of fizzle out into nowhere. Manson talks about a lot in his book Long Hard Road Out of Hell how there was kind of a turning point moment where he actually got sober from all the drugs following an overdose that he had, and he was like, no, you know, this has to be my potential.
Most amazing album ever.
And it is.
Well, you succeeded. Sobriety can be a really good, productive thing, regardless of what people think in terms of creating art. So
right, and it's
this
ironic.
is actually proof. Yeah.
Well, there was a lot of drugs involved in the writing of it, but the final execution of it was when he got sober and he got his shit together, and I think it's worth pointing that out.
I love the aesthetic in this period of time. I think he did an amazing job at taking his inspirations and like really running with it in his own way. He really, really came into his own and made it his own character.
I have to give this album 10 out of 10.
Agreed.
It's phenomenal. What more can be said? Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
For the 2,000 subscribers. Please subscribe. Please hit the bell icon for notifications. Check out our band, the God Bombs. We're going to be releasing some new material soon. We love you guys.
Bombs away!